Kings pick. Craig will make the Rockets pick. We just talked to Athletic colleague Andrew Schleck from Oklahoma City, who has Chet Holmgren off the board, Jabari Smith before him from Orlando. Also continuing to hear, and we're going to bounce this off our guy Sam, but just during the break, I was having a conversation with one of those people that know things. The Kings are still very much in the mix for John Collins. That is heating up a little bit. Joining us right now because he knows everything. And I mean everything about everything. It's just a matter of whether he chooses to disclose it or not. Also, from The Athletic, making my double subscription that much more worth it. The one, the only Sam Amick. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, gentlemen. How the heck are we today?
It's the greatest day in the Kings year.
It's Kings Christmas.
We're going to draft a Hall of Famer. It's happening.
One of these days.
You'd think. Right?
One of these days. He might not be playing for them when he becomes a Hall of Famer.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah.
Sam Amick.
Golly. I mean, that was, Sam Amick just
that hurt
fired.
My feelings.
He got right up on the sports horse and fired it off. Are you hearing similar things? There's a sports horse about John Collins, Sam. We know that Monty McNair and friends have flirted with John and his folks for a while now, but hearing that there's a fire with the smoke, call me a liar.
I mean, I'll call you a liar for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
But probably not this one. Although, admittedly, although you'd be proud of me, I'm not asleep this week. I'm ready for you guys. Sleepy Sam is taking the week off. But I haven't gotten, any updates this morning. As of last night, my sense on the Collins front was that the Kings were certainly trailing. I don't know who they were trailing. There's talk about San Antonio. There's talk about, some other squads. But the sense I got from the Atlanta side was that the Kings were going to need to put a fair amount more on the table if they wanted to get John Collins. I don't know all the pieces, but the offer was described to me as fairly significantly underwhelming.
Interesting on that. Sam, just on your Atlanta connections there and the digging you've been doing, why? Why do they want to move Collins?
That's a layered answer to the good question, Jay. I mean, for one, as you guys know, he's a guy that has not been ecstatic with his role in Atlanta for years now. And to his credit, it has not devolved into a negative situation. He's continued to compete. Man, shout out KCK Social. They waste no time tweeting out what I just said. That was amazing.
That's what we do, buddy. Sports landscape's changing, pal.
Wow. Making me gun shy in the interview now. John kept competing, but it's been like this imperfect partnership for quite a while. And, they got an extension done a while back that kind of extended the runway, but the dynamic was still the same, where John sees himself as, if not a number one option, kind of a 1B, and that's Trae Young territory out there. And so on the John side, that's it. And then they have a roster that obviously just went from being in the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years ago to really disappointing last season, and they're being aggressive in general. John is a very good player who, has a pretty good market.
Sam Amick joining us when it comes to the draft in general. And I know, I'm not making a joke here, I know draft is not your main thing that you do throughout the year, but you still have tremendous connections in camps, both team and agent-wise. It seems, Sam, like the top three may go chalk, but what are you hearing, if anything, about the Kings?
Actually, one of our guys who's going to occasionally do King stuff, Anthony Slater, took a break from his Warriors coverage to write about the Kings pick the other day, and I thought he nailed it in terms of the Jaden Ivey, Keegan Murray discussion. Certainly seems like that will be the fork in the road if they do end up keeping the pick. As far as, what player they want, what direction they want to go. Lots of chatter, as you guys know, locally about Keegan being the guy, nationally framing, it's the Kings, so there's always going to be a tougher spotlight on them where it's like, oh boy, is Jaden Ivey going to become, their next Luka type thing. And I do, again, can't pretend to know if this has changed in recent days, but heading into the draft, for sure, the sense I got on the Kings side was that, there was a pretty healthy desire to draft based on fit. And I know that it's always such an interesting debate because it's easy for some fans and media to say, you draft on talent and that's it. You figure it out later. And it's just like, all right, well, I mean, you could look at the Davion Mitchell pick and say, okay, you said figure it out later, but some fans are still unhappy that there was a ripple effect there that played a part in the Tyrese Halliburton trade. Like that's what happens when you draft on fit and you have an imbalanced roster. You go back obviously to the Luka Doncic, Marvin Bagley draft. That was drafting on fit that year. So they've kind of gone back and forth between all these front offices. So to me, Ivy and Murray, and a lot of chatter though about Murray being the guy potentially.
Sam, there was a trade yesterday with Jeremy Grant going to Portland. We already talked about the Kings and potentially some things here, John Collins and or other things out there. DeAndre Ayton. There's a lot of people, DeJounte Murray being mentioned. Why do you think there's so much trade talk? Is it because there's so few teams with cap money when free agency comes around, or just seems like there's more trade talk than I remember, at least at this time of year?
I feel like it's like fairly, I don't know, Jay. I feel like it's fairly standard fare. I mean, a lot of it, it's just once you hit draft in time and you're getting into free agency, you're going to have some of this chatter. I mean, but the free agency class, part of it is, I think, as far as the most straight ahead approach to team improvement, boatload the cap room and, wildly talented free agents. That's not necessarily the case this year. You've got these independent situations like James Harden, option in Philly and what's he going to do with his contract. And, Kyrie in Brooklyn, which is a super interesting situation, but that's not the kind of thing where really you're only talking about, 2 or 3 teams at most who could get in on that potentially. So as far as just like, player X is really good and there's 10 teams coming after him, which, that might kind of stall the trade market if the free agent market looked more like that. That's not the case. So the other part of it is, like the Jeremy Grant thing I thought was interesting because you have these situations with good players, not great players, that have been evolving for quite some time. I mean, the Jeremy Grant dynamics in Detroit, obviously going back well before the February trade deadline, where teams were trying to get him. Detroit was claiming he wasn't available, and so they're testing the market. Eventually they make a move on it. So part of it is just, I think, all that stuff coming to fruition.
Sam Amick of The Athletic joining us. I want to go back to, I'm still stuck on what you said about fit. And you and I talked to different people for sure. The philosophy I was getting was that the higher in the draft, the less worry about fit. The higher in the draft, the more it's about BPA, best player available. And then as if they were picking 21st, 25th, maybe you lean fit a little bit more in the on the draft board. And Sam, I'm the last guy to say you're wrong or that your odds are you're right, I'm wrong. But I just also know that I want to make sure there's clarity there on what you're hearing, because if you just mentioned our awesome digital team, if they decide to throw that quote out, you're going to have a frickin' riot here in Sacramento if they're drafting on fit.
I just want to make sure. Do I get a raise based on retweets? Things I say?
Yeah, you get one more athletic.
Dangerous system. It's a good thing I don't work that way.
Another sub.
No. Yeah, I mean, I'm only talking to neighbor John, so is that a problem too?
Got it.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. A little bourbon in there.
A little bourbon there. I mean, I don't know, Dave. Like, I don't know how to. I mean, I'm glad you readdressed it. I just think, again, things change quickly. We're not in the boardroom, so to speak.
Yep.
But it did seem to me that the message was that, the idea of grabbing another guard, which obviously Ivy is, was not going in the priority. Now, I don't have clarity on on the level of excitement internally about Jaden Ivey, and not only what he could do for the Kings, but obviously that idea just like, you draft Davion Mitchell, you don't worry about Tyrese and any impact there, or De'Aaron Fox. You just figure it out later. So, Ivy as a player in a Kings uniform, or Ivy and what he could maybe bring the Kings trade-wise, who knows? If they just let it play out. But beyond that, I do think that fit was something that was being considered fairly significantly.
Okay. Sam Amick of The Athletic. We'll, of course, recap all this stuff in a week. And in all seriousness, I give Sam a lot of bad time as we go to break. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you working. I know it's been a tough week for you this week, and I know you don't like personal stuff out there, but I'll say it. Props to you, dude. I know it's been a rough week. Apparently, you got crushed in pickleball Monday. You've been able to, you've been able to overcome, even though reports say your tears were tasty.
They were tasty.
Yeah.
Well, did he tell you my pathetic excuse? That I'm gonna make it even worse for myself.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is the bougiest excuse ever.
You tripped over your Lambo?
No, I was complaining because for Father's Day, because I'm getting old, my family wanted me to constantly know my heart rate, so they got me an Apple Watch. And so I just didn't feel the same playing pickleball with that Apple Watch on. It was kind of messing with my style, and I told neighbor John that I think that might have played a part.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That's from The Athletic. Get all that whining and more. Go to theathletic.com. Also download the app. You're the best, and we'll talk to you soon, friend.
All right, guys. Be good.